Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, the show where we dig deep into the insights of leading policymakers and business people in the Middle East and indeed the world. I'm Frank Kane. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Alain Bejjani, Chief Executive Officer of the Majid Al Futtaim Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Group, a business that spans the Gulf and beyond with its malls, supermarkets, cinemas and of course indoor ski slopes. Mr. Bejjani, welcome to Frankly Speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure joining you, Frank.
Thank you for making the time today. I mentioned indoor ski slopes, so let me get that one out of the way first. You've just begun construction on the biggest in the world, haven't you, in the Mall of Saudi in Riyadh. But tell me, frankly speaking, in the environmentally conscious world in which we live now, how sustainable is the concept of an indoor ski slope? Talk me through the green economics of that, please.
So it is sustainable. That's the short answer of it. Of course, it doesn't come without its fair share of hard work to get it there. And there is a lot of misconception around indoor ski slopes. So if you look at more of the Emirates Ski Dubai or the one that we're going to be having in our project in Riyadh, these are actually, I would say, LEED certified and will be LEED certified assets. More of the Emirates is a LEED certified asset. It's actually, it actually has been improving quite a lot, and we've been putting a lot of technology and investment in order to make it as sustainable as possible. So when you look at the actual slope, the slope is within, I would say, a fridge that preserves heat and preserves cold, so minimizes the heat going out and preserves cold inside. And we have a lot of technology to make sure that we actually use the least electricity possible and generate and have the lowest possible carbon footprint. So we have done a lot in that respect, whether it's using photovoltaic panels on the roof of more of the Emirates, for example, and there will be a lot, of course, in Riyadh, or whether it is making sure that the cold is actually trapped inside and does not go out. To give you an example, Ski Dubai, okay, you could actually turn off the cooling for 24 hours if people are not inside, and the temperature wouldn't rise. So with technology continuously improving, this is also improving on a continuous basis. To give you an example today, if we were to compare the consumption, I would say, of Ski Dubai, it would be equal to a mid-size hotel in terms of its electricity consumption as well as footprint, while its area is much bigger. So the reality is these are sustainable assets. These are assets that are natural, environmentally friendly to the extent possible, and these are assets that are continuously being improved in order to hopefully get to the point where they help us in reaching our goal and our pledge to become net positive by 2040 on water and carbon as Majid Al Futtaim. So what I want to say, while we develop and operate these assets, as an organization, Majid Al Futtaim has pledged 3 years ago, after COP21, to actually become net positive, not net zero, net positive by 2040 on water and carbon.
By 2040?
Absolutely.
Well, that's considerably earlier than
Yes.
Other entities in the region, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and we did it much earlier. We did it after COP21. We didn't wait for basically COP26 to do that, because we really believe that corporates in this part of the world that is blessed with huge natural endowments have a very big role to play as a private sector to help the region leapfrog on that side. And Majid Al Futtaim was the first organization that's privately owned that has actually a net positive pledge, and one of the very few globally that have a net positive pledge and not now a net zero pledge. So people going to net zero is a good step, but what we really need to do as organizations is actually to put back into the environment more than we take away from the environment. You know, balancing that, in my view, is not enough. We need to put back more in order to make sure that we pass on to the next generations more and a better environment than the one we have taken away from them, and that actually helped us so much.
Okay, I mentioned the Mall of Saudi, and you have just broken ground on that, haven't
Yes,
you? Construction
absolutely.
is now underway.
Yes.
But tell me, are you confident that the notion of physical retailing can be revived post-pandemic? What future is there in that?
Well, look, we have started the enabling works on October 28th. I think we met in FII and on the day where we had started in our North Riyadh project. And this is, of course, for us, a very important, a substantial investment and a very strategic project. We're doing it because we really believe in the future of retail, and we really believe that the future of retail is both physical and digital. There is this new word now that's coined, it's called phygital. And we are seeing that more and more. The reality is that in 2021, we have, I would say, more certainty compared to where we were in 2017 or 2018, where the world looked going towards a binary situation. It's going to be either digital or physical. The reality is no, the world is going to be more omni-channel, and you continue to have a lot of physical requirements, majorly physical requirements, but the transactions will happen more and more in the digital space. So malls are not only space where you actually transact, where you actually shop something. It's a place where people come together. It's a place where people meet. It's a place where fans and families spend time and create great moments together. And they, of course, shop, dine, or consume entertainment, etc., but build bonds. This is what malls' new roles are. They've always been this way. I think for a certain period of time, historically, malls were more focused, I would say, on the transactional nature of the relationship with the customer. At Majid Al Futtaim, we have gone beyond this for quite some time. If you look at I always give this example, if you look at the motto of Mall of the Emirates, it says, shopping is just the beginning. So it's only the beginning of a much more fulfilling journey. And this is what we're looking towards in Saudi Arabia, as well as in our malls across the region. So yes, we're confident that prime assets will always be in demand, and we're seeing that currently. We're also confident that people will always want to congregate and be together. We're just finished, I mean, not finished, but getting out of a pandemic. And we see how much all of us are yearning towards coming together, traveling again, meeting in person, going to conferences and exchanging in person, because there is nothing that is so far as fulfilling as the in-person contact. So this will continue to be there, but the function will change. And naturally, the economics will have to change. The financial equation will have to change, where the stakeholders will have to rethink how can we develop a new win-win situation that gives them the possibility to ultimately serve the customer better and a fulfilling experience.
Okay, well, let me ask you about that, because the pandemic lockdowns must have had a significant effect on your business.
Absolutely.
But we are now emerging from them, as you have suggested. What are the permanent changes that the pandemic will have effected?
Well, I would say the permanent changes are less than expected. We thought that we were going to have more durable, I would say, change in behavior, and we are seeing that people generally are going back to 2019, to pre-pandemic behaviors as fast as they can. So the reality is it's more a matter of when than a matter of if are we going to come back or not. This being said, there are certain trends that were happening before that are accelerating today. So digital is accelerating, and the pandemic helped digital actually leapfrog in terms of penetration of sales, and that's a good thing in my opinion. We continue to see that people are more, I would say, choosy and regarding when it gets to the experiences that they're going to engage in. And I think that's a good thing. We continue to see that we have more capabilities to communicate and to exchange, and we don't only rely anymore on physical movement, and we exchange quite well digitally, and that's a good thing as well, because you were asking me the question about the environmental impact of some of our businesses, but the reality is travel has a huge environmental impact, whether it's travel by road or it's travel by planes or differently. So we are much more environmentally conscious compared to where we were before, and we have valid alternatives that are as fulfilling from an experience standpoint. So I think the real changes, I would summarize them, is more digital, a big, I would say, anchorage of the physical space and the importance of the in-person exchanges, and at the same time becoming more choosy on having real fulfilling experiences. Okay. We have less time to waste on things that aren't fulfilling for us and actually do not really make sense.
I understand. I do like that word, phygital, and I think that's a great word. I will use that. Tell me, at what stage of recovery is the Majid Al Futtaim business overall? When do you think we'll get back to 2019 levels of activity and of profitability?
So this is a question that we continuously basically debate. What is recovery? Because we have, we are in multi-industries, and some industries have recovered while others have not yet recovered. So when you look at our overall results, they are affected by the ones that haven't recovered yet. For example, the cinema business and the L&E business. This is a business that's recovering slower than others and is now actually affected by supply chain issues. When you look at the cinema business, this is a business that's really affected in 2021, not only by the limitations on occupancy, but also by the fact that the unavailability of movies because of production delays, so all the supply chain issues that were triggered by the pandemic. So we have to look at recovery of sectors once we go back to normal trading conditions. So until now, we have caps on occupancy in certain markets. So we're not yet in a recovery mode. We're still going through the impact of the pandemic. While in other businesses, for example, shopping malls, we are ahead of 2019. Ahead of 2019 on footfall, for example, and almost there in terms of sales, given that some shifts happened to digital more than it was expected in 2019. So the recovery is something that one has to define. Financially, it will have an impact. Retail, grocery retail is a great example that had actually a very good 2020 year because people were at home and consuming at home more than before. But in 2021, there was a correction because of the people going back to the normal consumption behavior and going out more, etc., etc. So 2021 was the difficult year, not the 2020. 2020 was a difficult year to be able to fulfill and to be able to serve the customers in the safety of their homes and navigate through the very strict restrictions that we had to deal with because of the pandemic. But in 2021, when we had less restrictions or no restrictions, people could go back to stores, the actual consumption changed because people are consuming less, they're not at home anymore as much as they were, etc. So the financial hit happened in 21 and not in 2020. I personally believe that some of the businesses will not go back to 2019 because, as we say, the acceleration of the shifts. So, but you have to capture that business online. What you lost offline, you have to capture it online and capture the growth that's happening there. So this is why the recovery is a more complex situation. I don't think, personally, we will get to a recovery situation across before 2024.
24, okay. And tell me, is the recovery uniform across the big markets? I'm thinking of Saudi, Egypt, and the UAE, the three biggest markets for you in the region. Is it uniform across those?
It's not uniform, and the hard time of the pandemic wasn't uniform as well. I mean, Egypt grew in 2020 as opposed to any other market in the region, continued to grow and do very well in 2021. The UAE has had a remarkable resilience in 2020 and now is buzzing across the board. We've had an excellent second half of the year, especially the fourth quarter that we are in, and basically things are off to a very good start in 2022. Tourism is back much more than anywhere else in the region. The MICE business is back much more than anywhere else in the region, and there is a lot of confidence that's happening here. A lot of people are moving to Dubai and the UAE, and FDI are coming, etc., etc. Saudi Arabia, I think, had great resilience during the pandemic, but actually Saudi Arabia measures were quite different from the ones that we have seen in the other markets. In Egypt, there was very little measures to no measures. UAE had measures that were quite business friendly, I would say, during the core of the pandemic. Saudi Arabia opted for a more drastic shutdown kind of situation and benefits from a larger population on the inside that actually gave resilience to consumption internally, but also elected during that period of time to go for some, I would say, needed fiscal adjustments that had an impact on consumption, and that was inevitable. Now we are seeing, I've been there, I think, in the past few months more than 3 times, and you see that it's buzzing, it's coming back. We were in FII, and there was quite a good, I would say, for a first event that's happening post the pandemic with the restrictions, quite a good turnout. Almost everyone was there one way or the other. So Saudi Arabia is also very, I would say, encouraging.
Right. Tell me, just in broad conceptual terms, what is the attraction of Saudi Arabia for a business like Majid Al Futtaim?
Well, look, Saudi Arabia is the largest economy in this part of the world, so no one can avoid Saudi Arabia. That's one, and in reality, everyone wants to be part of Saudi Arabia. For Majid Al Futtaim, we've been in the kingdom for now more than 15 years with our Carrefour business, with our now with Vox Cinema, with our energy management and facilities management businesses, with our retail business. So we have a number of businesses in Saudi for quite some time, and we consider ourselves, of course, local. It's our home market, Saudi Arabia. So what happened in Saudi Arabia in the past 5 years is a blessing. We have done business in Saudi pre-2015, 2016, and post-2015, 2016. What's happening since 2015 in Saudi Arabia is actually something that everyone was dreaming about. Everyone was dreaming to have Saudi Arabia open up, to have Saudi Arabia come back to actually becoming a vibrant and even more vibrant economy, more inclusive economy, getting women back into the workforce, but also into the place role into society, get entertainment back into the kingdom. That's actually where there is a big demand. Saudi Arabia is a very young population that really wants a modern lifestyle and consumes modern lifestyle in a fantastic way when you look at cultural products. And you also see the great investment opportunities that exist in the country. So Saudi has so much to give. And Saudi Arabia has a lot of potential, and naturally, any business, whether it's in the region or any business that's looking at the region, cannot ignore or not look seriously into Saudi Arabia.
You recently announced, Mr. Bejjani, a big increase in the Emirati participation in Majid Al Futtaim's workforce in the UAE.
Yes.
Tell me the logic of that, and do you have plans for any of the other markets in the region to do something similar?
So the short answer is yes, and localization for us is a very important, I would say, strategy. I always say that localization gives you competitiveness. I know that in the GCC in general, in the past years, there were a lot of compliance-led initiatives. So you had to have a minimum level of local, locals in every market. But I think this is wrong. The reality is for any business, if you want to understand your market, you have to basically be local in that market. And what we have done in the UAE is a pledge to hire 3,000 Emiratis within the coming 5 years. I'm very happy to say that within 3 months, we've hired more than 350 of them. And we are basically looking at achieving our first year goal that should actually be achieved by end of 22, achieve it somewhere around the end of 21, first quarter 22, so much earlier. And this is simply because it gives us more competitive advantage. Now, this is the commercial rationale. If you go to Saudi Arabia, for example, some of our business are more than 95% Saudis, like in some of our cinema assets and some of our Carrefours, we have 100% Saudis in our stores. Our localization rate in Saudi is extremely high, and simply because this is something that we really believe in, and we will continue to do so. But what I want to say is that any corporate, any private sector company that does not add value to its community has no reason to exist. The reason why these enterprises exist is beyond, creating shareholder value. It's creating stakeholder value. So we have an important role as business leaders, as organizations, to add value to the communities that we operate in. And the obvious thing that you need to do in our communities in this part of the world is to create employment, to create jobs, and to create job security, to give people the ability to have actually a positive outlook on the future. And of course, you have to do that in a way that is sustainable, because it's not about giving someone a job today, it's making sure that that person has a career ahead so they can plan their life and they can evolve, they can learn. Eventually they might move to other organizations, they might move to other career path, but at the end of the day, you've put them on the right trajectory. I think we have a big role to play there, and that's what Majid Al Futtaim, I would say, it takes very seriously. You go to a market like Egypt that you just mentioned, we're more than 99% local in Egypt. So some markets naturally, I would say, lend themselves to that because you have the talent that's there, and these are usually talent exporting markets. Some markets, it takes more effort, but I think we should, and we are, as Majid Al Futtaim, equally committed.
But the Saudi market is already 90% plus
Well, some of our assets are more than 90% Saudization. On average, we are somewhere around 40% Saudization in Saudi, and we are looking to actually improve to about 60%.
Okay. You mentioned Carrefour, which has always intrigued me in this region because it is such a quintessentially French brand, isn't it? Yes, yet it has enormous appeal here. What is that appeal?
Well, I would say Carrefour is a French name, but it's actually a local brand. And this is something that is very close to our heart. So you know that Majid Al Futtaim journey with Carrefour started about 25 years ago. And from the beginning, we have been extremely and strategically focused to make sure that it's a local brand. When you look at our Carrefour business, you see that the logo is actually the Majid Al Futtaim logo, not the logo that the Carrefour France logo. And this is something that we did in agreement with Carrefour France, because we always believed, and they also believe the same, that in order to win in our markets, you have to be local. When you look at what we actually do, you see that all of our manpower in the region is local. Okay, all of our suppliers, the vast majority of our suppliers are local. The reality is these businesses are businesses where the local economy thrives. So our suppliers are local, our producers are local, our products are local. We import, of course, from outside of the region, but we do not. We try to import the least from outside the region and try to promote local producer and local manufacturing, because it's more sustainable, it has a lower carbon footprint, and naturally we create more stakeholder value. So when you go to our brand, today Carrefour in the region is an Emirati brand, it's an Egyptian brand in Egypt, it's a Saudi brand in Saudi Arabia, it's a Bahraini brand in Bahrain, it's a Pakistani brand in Pakistan, etc., etc. The brands, the manpower, the suppliers, all of them are locals.
Okay. You've described that very well, but to me it still has a certain je ne sais quoi.
It's because you're Francophile, Frank, but you don't know it. But you don't know it.
Probably. Let me ask you about the cinema business, because Vox was a very early beneficiary, wasn't it, from the great reforms in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia when they opened up after decades.
Absolutely.
Then came the pandemic, and they all closed down again.
Yes.
So where are we now? Can you ever persuade people to get off the sofa, into the cinema, and turn off Netflix?
Yes, that's the short answer of it. And this was a question that we were asking ourselves during the pandemic, etc. But I think people maxed on Netflix to a large extent. It doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to consume Netflix and the likes. But the reality is, when the cinemas opened back to business, we saw people coming back. The challenge that we had in the cinemas was actually the movies and the inventory. We needed something for people to watch. And we have seen that the region opened earlier than others, especially Dubai. And we have seen that actually a lot of studios, whether it's Hollywood or Bollywood studios, decided to defer the release of their movies because they were afraid that they will not get the right welcome given the level of constraints that you had on occupancies, the limitation of occupancies, as well as the other markets globally that were still shut down, whether it was the US, Europe, etc., etc. So what happened is, when movies came back, people actually got off the couch and came to the movies, and people like it. People love the experience. Cinema is an experience that you share with others, and there is nothing like the magic of being in a theater and people laughing together and living those emotions together. Of course, consuming cultural products at home is something that's on the rise and will continue to be on the rise. But the reality is, we consume a certain type of product at home, and the cinema experience is a very different experience. So what we have seen in 2021 is people are coming back to the movies, but they're coming back to the movies when there is something to watch. We have suffered as theaters from the lack of availability of movies. A lot of movies have been delayed to 2022 and then delayed again in 2021, then delayed again to 2022. And Saudi Arabia, for example, is a fantastic market for local content, whether it's Arabic content, whether it's Khaliji or Egyptian content. And this is where we need, and we are, driving a lot of effort to make sure that we enable that local content much more.
You
And
have
this
big
is why-
ambitions in cinema, don't you? And
Absolutely.
I think you'll be attending the Red Sea Film Festival that's coming up.
Yes, so one of the things that we wanted, I would say the signs that you wanted to give, is that we decided to be title sponsor of the Red Sea Film Festival for Vox Cinema to do that, because we want to signal our commitment to content development, to local production, and how we can enable all of that. And this is something, by the way, Frank, that we actually shared with our Saudi, I would say, partners in government at the time, when we were in the very, very early days of issuing the licenses and saying, what are we going to do? Is it just about opening cinemas or not? To be fair, the Saudi authorities at the time had in mind saying, okay, we're going to open the market for cinemas. This is something that absolutely should happen. But we also want to develop and encourage cultural content and local production development. And we told them this is something that we are very committed to. And that's what we are doing. So we started to do that through distribution. We distribute most of the content that happens, that is generated from the region. I'm very happy to share with you, for example, that the most important UAE movie from a production budget standpoint that came out this week, Kameen, is distributed by Vox, and of course a lot of other movies that are produced in the region are distributed by us. So that's on the distribution side, but we're now also moving on the production side to enable production, either to produce, co-produce, or actually enable one way or the other, because we have a huge market with a lot of young and not so young cultural product consumers that want local content. And this is how we can contribute to the rebirth of I would say, our civilization, and to rebirth of the cultural life in our part of the world. All this opening that you're seeing in Saudi Arabia, that you have seen and you continue to see in the UAE and in Dubai, that you see in other parts of the region, needs to be sustained and actually gives place to creativity, to development, to talent. And this is where we move from being a region that consumes cultural product to a region that develops cultural product. And I think Majid Al Futtaim and Vox Cinema have a big role to play in that, and we're committed to make it happen.
Mr. Bejjani, I know that you attended the FII in Riyadh. Give me, if you would, your overall impressions leaving that. Saudi Arabia has very ambitious targets to attract foreign direct investment. Can they do it?
Well, look, I've attended every FII since the beginning, and I have seen how it has evolved. Naturally, this year is a bit different because of COVID and the restrictions and so on. But honestly, I was impressed by seeing everyone. I mean, the who's who was there. We did not have, I think, the same amount of delegates that maybe we had the first time. That's the impression I had. But everyone was there. It was a good conversation. It was happening in a buzzing Riyadh, which is extremely encouraging. Now, of course, the question is, can Saudi meet its FDI targets? They now also issued new targets for the coming years of about 100 billion. So they are very ambitious targets. The simple question, can they do it? Yes, they can do it. Is it good? I think it's fantastic if they can do it for Saudi and for the region. In order to do it, there is, of course, a lot that needs to happen. In my interaction with the Saudi government across the board, I have never seen the level of commitment that I have seen. I have never seen the level of hard work that's happening, and I have never seen the level of awareness of what it takes to get there. So, as a private sector business, I would say this is encouraging. Now, the way things translate on the ground, the execution, and of course the difficulties in execution that happen everywhere, is something that you have to watch. I also believe that an economy that's coming back needs not only FDI, but needs simply investments from within as well. And I think with more opening, I think with leveling the playing field to the private sector, Saudi will get more FDI and will get more investment internally, whether from within Saudi or from the region. And I would encourage as much as possible to level the playing field. And this is something that to be perfectly honest, I've seen starting to happen, and we need to really see it in reality on the ground.
Finally, Mr. Bejjani, competition between the big economies in the region has been intensifying, hasn't it? It's all about attracting that vital foreign direct investment. Do you think that the big economies can grow the overall cake fast enough, or will they end up competing against each other in a negative sense? Will they take each other's business?
I think the worst would be for people to think that it's either you or me. So competing, as you say, is the negative set and try to take each other business. I personally believe that the region has a lot to offer and a lot of capabilities that exist. If you look at, and you know, we've issued as Majid Al Futtaim in January 2020 in WEF in Davos in 2020, a study about the regional economic integration and the potential it has. And a very simple number today, we have a region of 600 million people. The total of our GDPs is about 3 trillion. The potential to just get to a global average. So if you just take the global average for GDP per capita, you multiply it by the number of people that are in this region, we should be at 6 trillion. So doubling our economies is simply a starting point in terms of the economic output. So the cake can be bigger. We should compete, and competition is healthy and is good. So the region should compete to attract FDI, to compete for the best business environment, compete for the best living environment, compete for talent. This is very, very good, and we need that. But we should also not forget that we are also complementary in a lot of ways. And we shouldn't be blinded by competition and forget the complementarity and how the total can be greater than the sum of the parts. What we are saying as Majid Al Futtaim, and I think most of the private sector is saying to the government, guys, remember that the total is greater than the sum of the parts, and let's work together, because all of our economies are small economies in the context of the global economy. We are not China, we are not the US, we are not Europe, but we have the capabilities. We have the fundamentals to eventually get there. There's a lot of work that needs to happen. But the reality is, if we bring our markets closer, everyone can achieve their targets. So let's not go into the short term, what seems to be a short-term goal of me or you, and move into you and I, and try to do it together. I think everyone will win in that context.
Alain Bejjani, thank you very much for appearing on Frankly Speaking.